Hey everyone, welcome to Moving Matt. We do all things cameras with a dash of vlogs and a little bit of travel. And today I'm going to be going over my top 5 most likely Sony cameras coming in 2022. So yeah, that's a little bit of a mouthful, but I think you get the gist of it. So I'm going to be basing this list upon the different rumors that we heard, as well as kind of just what makes sense based upon the natural progression of Sony cameras, and also what we're due for. So obviously the chip shortage has put a wrench in pretty much every company's plans, so it's kind of going to make this speculation a little bit harder to do, but it's fun to speculate anyways, so let's get into it. So at number 5, I have the Sony A7C Mark II. The reasons that it could happen is we've heard for a long time that the A7C II was supposed to come out a year from the A7 IV. So the A7 IV was just released, so it kind of follows that the A7C II will be coming a year afterwards. We also know that Sony loves to repackage things, hence the A7C in the first place, along with the A7S III and the FX3 coming shortly after. This would also fall in line with the chip shortage, considering this would be using a lot of the components from the A7 IV. It would make sense that they were able to order one thing in bulk and just repackage it in multiple cameras. Now, reasons that this might not happen, well, is kind of also the chip shortage. The Sony A7 IVs just came out, and along with it, the press statement saying, due to high demand, we are unable to fulfill orders. So since that's the case, it seems like the Sony A7 IV maybe won't have had time to come out long enough for an A7C Mark II. And even though the rumors said that the A7C Mark II would be coming a year after the A7 IV, if we look at the history, the A7C Mark I came quite a few years after the A7 III. So if I'm Sony, I'm not wanting to dig into my A7 IV sales just yet, especially considering with the chip shortages, things are more expensive. They probably haven't had these components long enough to be able to bring those prices down to repackage them and put them into the A7C. But it's still a possibility, and that's why I have it coming in at my number 5 spot. Coming in at number 4, I have the RX100 Mark VIII. So a lot of people have been expecting this camera for a while now. I think it was August 2018 since the RX100 Mark VII. So it is overdue at this point. We could get a better touchscreen as well as a new sensor and a new processor. Pretty much everything could be updated about this camera at this point. Back when the ZV-1 came out, a lot of people were speculating it was going to be this camera, and it kind of leads me to the reason why it may not be coming and why it's only on my number 4 spot, and that is the ZV-1 is still a pretty good seller. And also, I kind of wonder if that was their way of starting to rebrand the RX100 line, and if maybe they'd be more likely to come out with a ZV-1 Mark II rather than a new RX camera. The reasons that they may want to be doing that is because we do have the dedicated camera market shrinking quite a bit, especially when it comes to not being interchangeable lenses. The reason being, well, the rise of the smartphone, and even though you could get some pretty impressive results off of a 1-inch sensor, they may think that having a dedicated camera, at least a non-interchangeable lens dedicated camera, makes more sense to come in closer to the $600 mark rather than the $1,000 or $1,000+ mark. But I definitely think there's going to be some movement in that compact camera market, and that's why it makes my number 4 spot. Coming in at number 3, I have an A6600 successor, so whatever they're gonna call it. Sony Alpha Rumors seems to think maybe they'll call it an A7000, and it'll have the body closer to the A7 IV, but just have an A7C sensor. That is a possibility, but they also say that Sony has been very stubborn so far. Now, there was a recent rumor saying that this camera would be coming out and it would have 4K 60 10-bit. So at first I thought Sony may just be coming, so many C's and B's and D's and 1s and 2s and 3s. So for a while I thought that Sony may be abandoning the APS-C sensor size, but then they released the ZV-E10 along with Tamron releasing 2 new lenses for the APS-C sensor size, and Tamron is partially owned by Sony now, so I feel like they would have some insider information when it comes to developing lenses. Also, we've heard recently that the Canon R7 would be maybe coming out this coming year, and I think if Canon is is going to be diving into that sensor size, then Sony's not going to just want to leave it completely alone. And that makes me think that a follow-up to the A6600 is definitely still going to happen. Now, personally, I think if you're going to go with an APS-C sensor, then you should go Fujifilm. I think that they invest the most time and the most effort into their APS-C sensor size. And I think with them coming out with whatever their new flagship is going to be, they're going to be light years ahead of 4K at 10-bit 60. That's just my opinion. Hopefully they'll catch up with the autofocus. Anyways, enough about Fujifilm. Let's go to my number 2 pick. And this is where I think things are starting to get to the realm of this is pretty much definitely going to happen. So at number 2, I have the Sony A9 Mark III. So there's been a whole lot of rumors saying that the A9 III is coming out for a while now, and they seem to be stacking on top of each other. So recently, Sony Alpha Rumors just said that Sony is going to be focusing in their attention for new camera releases at the second half of 2022 since the supply chain issues and all that jazz. But they did say that there is going to be one camera that is likely going to be coming in the first half. And so I'm guessing that that camera would be the A9 Mark III. The reason is we do have the Winter 2022 Olympics coming in February, so I can see them announcing it maybe at late January, kind of like a somewhat of a development announcement, or at least saying that it's going to be coming, and then they can have the prototypes there for the Winter Olympics. I think that seems to make the most sense. Now, personally, I think that this will probably be Sony's fastest camera. It's just going to have significantly less megapixels. Also, they're not going to be focusing in on any of the video features that the A1 offers. But with the sheer amount of rumors and with it lining up with the 2022 Olympics, it makes me think that the A9 Mark III is definitely coming, and that's why it's in my number 2 spot. Now, coming in at number 1 is another camera that's been heavily rumored, and that is the Sony A7R Mark V. So the reason this camera makes the most sense to be coming out, besides the fact that it's being rumored pretty much every other month at this point, is, well, it's kind of the only A7 camera that doesn't really step on the toes of its predecessor. And I think that, especially since they're saying that most Sony cameras are going to be at the later half, maybe closer to autumn of 2022, it makes sense that by then the A7R IV will kind of have had its run. It seems like it'll be time for a refresh, especially considering all the menu differences that are now in all the Sony cameras. It feels like the R is the one that's kind of being left behind at this point. It will be interesting to see if they will keep the same sensor size and they're just going to add the different processing power. And with the extra processing power, I think they may even add 8K video, which has been rumored. I know that video is not going to be the focus of an R series camera, but since you'll have the processing power, it kind of makes sense that they will add that. Also, with the new processor, you can get a whole lot more speed out of that sensor size and update a lot of the autofocusing features that are now being found in the other A7 cameras. But that is just my list. Those are the top 5 cameras that I think are the most likely to come out in 2022 for Sony. Drop down in the comment section below and give me your list. Do you think that I am way off base? Do you agree with me? If you've liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And until next time, peace.